Venezuela is in the midst of a significant crisis that started in March when the Supreme Court of Venezuela, ordered by the president, announced that they will not obey the National Assembly. They will not accept the National Assembly as a legitimate institution. The National Assembly is controlled by the opposition. 2/3 of its members are part of the opposition because of an election held in 2015 in which the opposition won by a landslide. Since then, because of the lack of recognition by other government-controlled entities, the crisis has unfolded. But since March, protests have been held in the country that have led to more than 100 people dying and significant violence all over the country. And in the middle of this crisis, President Maduro announces that he's convoking a Constituent Assembly, which is a very powerful entity, and that he will use that assembly to reorganize all the Venezuelan institutional system and constitution. The assembly basically has power to rewrite the Venezuelan constitution, but also it can control all the other institutions in the country and disband them, including the National Assembly, which is controlled by the opposition. The elections were held. We saw a significant number of very important countries saying that they would not accept this Constituent Assembly. The United States stated that, Canada, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru. So most of the countries in the Western Hemisphere, plus the European Union and some specific countries in the European Union, including the United Kingdom, said that they will not recognize this assembly. Milder type of sanction will be sanctions limiting some type of financial transactions, like giving additional credit by a U.S. institution to the Venezuelan government or to the national company PDVSA. Some stronger sanctions will be to ban the export of oil, light oil, and refined products from the U.S. to Venezuela. Venezuela, even though it's a major oil exporter, today is importing around 120,000 barrels of oil and products. About half of it is used for the domestic market of gasoline and other products. The other half is used to blend it with the extra heavy oil that Venezuela produces that cannot be exported without either blending or upgrading, and re-export it. So if the U.S. imposed that ban, not only the domestic consumers in Venezuela might suffer, but also it might be difficult to re-export about 200,000 to 250,000 barrels of extra heavy oil. Of course, Venezuela can use other sources. It can import products from Europe, and it can import oil from Algeria and Nigeria, but that would be costlier, and given the difficult situation that the cash situation that the company has, it might not be possible. The harder, an additional step will be to impose a ban on imports of crude oil from Venezuela. Venezuela exports to the U.S. around 750,000 barrels of oil per day, mostly heavy oil, mostly to the refineries in the Gulf of Mexico, in Texas and Louisiana. Companies like Citgo, which is owned by the state-owned enterprise of Venezuela, PDVSA, and other companies like Valero, Phillips 66, and Chevron are the ones importing that crude. If they are banned from importing that, Venezuela will have to find other markets. It turns out that it's not easy to sell the heavy oil that Venezuela sells elsewhere, and the options are probably India or China. The thing is that this has higher transportation costs, and in addition, they will have to offer a very significant discount to compete with the current providers of the heavy oil in those countries. And the Venezuelan national company is already in a very difficult situation in terms of its finances, and the cash that it's receiving is mostly from the exports to the US. So this will be a major blow to the cash flow. The last type of sanctions is a blanket sanction of the national company of Venezuela and other Venezuelan entities to do any financial transaction with the US financial system. That will be the biggest of all, because it will affect both exports and imports and any other, potentially any other transaction, and that will be a major blow too. So what will be the effects of all those sanctions on Venezuela? As I mentioned, it depends on how harsh the sanctions imposed are, but the harsher type of sanctions will have a massive impact on the economy. They will basically make the oil company probably enter into default of the external debt, and that will result in much smaller exports and, as a result, much less imports of food and medicine for Venezuelan for the Venezuelan consumers and for the Venezuelan population. This is an economy that has shrunk by about a third in the last 3 years, and this will make it even worse. And so suffering and of the population will increase significantly. Elections were held that President Maduro was added in the list of individuals subject to the sanctions. Of course, this is mostly a symbolic measure, because it will only affect President Maduro if he has financial accounts in the US or assets in the US, which is not likely that he held personally. However, it does put the president of Venezuela in a list that includes President Assad of Syria, President Mugabe of Zimbabwe, and President Kim Jong-un from North Korea, which is clearly a list in which you don't want to be. However, the more significant sanctions have not been imposed at this time, and there is a speculation if and when they will be imposed. What of these many of sanctions, which ones could be effective? Well, continuing with the individual sanctions seems like a reasonable thing to do, because it will affect individuals who are committing crimes and are participating in violations of human rights to Venezuelans. I will put pressure into the government. In fact, some of the individual sanctions also affect the national company, because, for example, the CFO of PDVSA is in the list, and now he cannot do any transactions with a U.S. company. So this is likely to continue to happen, and I think it's an effective way to pressure the government. Going above that, it seems to me that the key here is that the U.S. can have these sanctions as a measure of last resort, but the problem with actually implementing them is that, first of all, they will tremendously affect the Venezuelan people that have already been significantly hurt by the massive economic recession. And second, it might backfire in a sense that some Venezuelan analysts like Moises Nain have suggested that it could actually reinforce the support to the government, because they will have an external enemy to blame for the massive economic crisis that the country is facing. Going to get worse for Venezuela, and the question is, what can the opposition do and the international community do to try to get Venezuela out of this situation? The answers are not easy. There is very little that can be done at this point. Of course, international pressure and sanctions may offer some opportunity for pressuring the government for change, but it's hard to pressure a government when the likely answer to change is an election in which they will be thrown out of office. And that's why some members of the current regime are so unwilling, because they believe that they might face retribution and potentially criminal indictment for some of the human rights violations and other criminal activity that some of them have committed. So that's one of the difficulties, and that's why President Maduro and his group are trying to hold to power despite all the massive cost. In the end, the balance of power is in the hands of the Venezuelan military that are at this point holding a dictatorship in place. And the international community, of course, can pressure them by threatening to impose personal sanctions on some of them if they do not abide by the existing constitution that is the only one recognized by the international community. But the opposition has very little room to maneuver except for continue the internal pressure and protest and try to delegitimize the government and legitimize the National Assembly, which they do control. And it's today the entity that the most foreign governments recognize as the legislative power of Venezuela and not the Constituent Assembly.